Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Friday, September 17th. This is Africa 54.
A human rights group sounds the alarm on the alleged targeting of Eritrean refugees in Tigray. The West African bloc, ECOWAS, resorts to sanctions over coups in Guinea and Mali. And a vintage live music performance by the world's leading Ngoni player.
Eritrean soldiers and Tigrayan militias have allegedly raped, detained and killed Eritrean refugees in Ethiopia's northern region of Tigray, according to Human Rights Watch. Soraya Ali has more.
Eritrean soldiers and Tigrayan militias raped, detained and killed Eritrean refugees in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region. That's according to a report by Human Rights Watch released on Thursday. It detailed attacks around 2 refugee camps in Tigray, Shemelba and Hitsats, drawing on interviews with 28 refugees and other sources, including satellite imagery. Local forces in Tigray have been battling the Ethiopian government and their Eritrean allies since November. But the region is also home to tens of thousands of Eritrean refugees. HRW's Horn of Africa director, Letitia Bader, said Eritrean refugees have been attacked both by the very forces they fled back home and by Tigrayan fighters. Eritrea has previously denied atrocities and said its forces have not targeted civilians. A spokesman for the Tigray People's Liberation Front said formal uniformed Tigrayan forces had only recently moved into the area and that it was possible abuses were committed by local militias. HRW said Eritrean forces arrived in Hitsats on November 19th, killed residents and pillaged and occupied the refugee camp. They cited UNHCR figures that more than 7,600 out of 20,000 refugees who were living in the camps are still missing. In every house, people were killed, one resident told HRW. The report said Tigrayan forces returned on December 5th, and refugees in nearby villages reported being shot at and attacked with grenades. The violence and severe food shortages forced some refugees to return to Eritrea. Others fled south to 2 other camps. Tigrayan forces took over those camps in June, and refugees have reported killings and looting.
That was Soraya Ali of Reuters reporting. The White House issued a statement from President Joe Biden Friday, reiterating that the ongoing conflict in northern Ethiopia is causing great human suffering while threatening the unity of Ethiopia. Almost 1 million people are living in famine-like conditions, and millions more face acute food insecurity as a direct consequence of the violence. Humanitarian workers are being blocked, harassed and killed. President Biden says he is appalled by the reports of mass murder, rape and sexual violence to terrorize civilian populations. To that end, Biden signed an executive order Friday establishing new sanctions regime that will allow the U.S. to target those responsible for or complicit in prolonging the conflict in Ethiopia, obstructing humanitarian access or preventing a ceasefire. Meanwhile, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed on Friday has written an open letter to President Biden saying, in part, the international community, including the U.S., has put undue pressure on his country, characterized by double standards as it pertains to Ethiopia's rule of law operations in the Tigray region. Abiy said, quote, as a longtime friend, strategic ally and partner in security, the United States' recent policy against my country comes not only as a surprise to our proud nation, but evidently surpasses humanitarian concerns. In West Africa, the region's main political and economic bloc is using sanctions to tackle the recent coup in Guinea and to put pressure on a junta in Mali. It's the toughest response yet from ECOWAS to a run of military takeovers. David Doyle explains.
Travel bans and the freezing of financial assets have been imposed on the junta that seized power in Guinea. The sanctions are the toughest response yet from West Africa's main regional bloc to a run of military takeovers. And the economic community of West African states didn't stop there. Guinea's neighbour Mali also experienced a coup last year. After an emergency summit on Thursday, ECOWAS said the same sanctions would apply to anyone found to be slowing Mali's post-coup transition. With Guinea, ECOWAS President Jean-Claude Cassibrou said regional leaders were insisting on the release of ousted President Alpha Conde and a short transition.
They even went to the way of clearly stating that the transition should not last more than 6 months. So 6 months, elections should be held.
In Mali, authorities have pledged to hold elections early next year, but the promises have been undermined by the failure to meet various deadlines. In May, the colonel who led the initial coup, Assimi Goïta, ordered the arrest of the country's interim president and took over the role himself.
And they did insist, they reaffirmed again, that the date set for the election, end February 2022, is not negotiable. We're very clear and insisted on that.
Leaders who took part in the summit hailed the more hardline stance. Senegal's President Macky Sall tweeted that he welcomed the strong actions to safeguard democracy, peace, security and stability. West and Central Africa has seen 4 coups since last year, intensifying concerns over a backslide towards military rule.
David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. The US, Britain and Australia are hailing the announcement of a new security pact which will see Australia getting US nuclear-powered submarine technology in a bid to counter China in the Indo-Pacific. China is condemning the deal and France is outraged after Australia abandoned its submarine deal with Paris. VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sen has the latest.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin welcomed Australia's Foreign Secretary and Defense Secretary to the State Department to hail their new trilateral defense partnership known as AUKUS, which includes the United Kingdom.
The first initiative under AUKUS is our shared ambition to support Australia acquiring nuclear-powered submarines for the Royal Australian Navy.
The deal angered both China and France, with Beijing saying it undermines regional peace and stability. France has been working on a conventional submarine deal with Australia for years, and top officials in Paris said they felt stabbed in the back that the U.S. did not even consult them.
C'est une énorme déception.
It's a huge disappointment, especially as all the teams have been working hard for 5 years to ensure the proper implementation and smooth running of this major contract, which was to provide Australia with 12 conventionally powered submarines as requested.
Blinken sought to tamp down the outrage in Paris, saying the U.S. wants Europe involved in the Pacific.
And as I said, France in particular is a vital partner on this, on so many other things. Stretching back a long, long time, but also stretching forward into the future.
Australia's defense minister tried to explain what happened with France, saying Canberra's Navy advised them they needed nuclear-powered submarines instead of conventional submarines.
And so we looked at what options were available to us. The French have a version which was not superior to that operated by the United States and the United Kingdom.
Secretary Austin addressed China.
On the issue of China, let me just emphasize up front that, this agreement, this relationship is not aimed at anything or anyone. The intent here is to help improve our trilateral cooperation and in our capabilities across the board.
One expert told VOA the nuclear submarine deal shows China may have gone too far in pressuring Australia and others in the Indo-Pacific.
For those three countries to really focus on trying to deepen essentially their military technology sharing, which is already very deep, but to deepen it even more and focus on the Pacific is, clearly, I think, a message that they take this very seriously and that they take the Chinese threat very seriously.
The European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, was also upset about the deal and said this is a stark reminder that Europe has to make the issue of its strategic autonomy a priority, saying this shows that we must survive on our own. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
A growing number of U.S. Republicans, including state governors, are vowing to mount legal challenges against President Joe Biden's sweeping measures to compel workers and federal employees to get vaccinated against COVID-19. White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara has the details.
Vaccine disinformation, including American rapper Nicki Minaj's erroneous viral tweet alleging coronavirus vaccination causes impotence, and Republican governors opposing President Joe Biden's vaccine mandates. These are just some of the challenges faced by the administration in trying to get more Americans vaccinated.
I proposed a requirement for COVID vaccines, and the governor of that state calls it, quote, a tyrannical type move. A tyrannical type move? This is the worst kind of politics because it's putting the lives of citizens of their states, especially children, at risk. And I refuse to give in to it.
On Thursday, Biden slammed Republican governors fighting the mandate he announced last week to require vaccines for federal staff and contractors, healthcare personnel, and employees of businesses with 100 or more workers. More than a dozen states have enacted laws prohibiting mandatory COVID-19 vaccinations or even requirements for proof of vaccination.
When you have a president like Biden issuing unconstitutional edicts against the American people, we have a responsibility to stand up for the Constitution and to fight back, and we are doing that in the state of Florida.
Even though the vaccine is free and readily available, only 55% of Americans are fully vaccinated. The administration hopes the Biden vaccine mandate will boost that number. The move is supported by 60% of Americans, according to a recent Axios-Ipsos poll.
That majority support hides very deep partisan divisions where over 80% of Democrats support the mandate, over 60% of independents support it, but only about 30% of Republicans support this new requirement, reflecting the continuing division on issues of COVID in the country.
COVID-related mandates have jeopardized political futures. Democratic California Governor Gavin Newsom faced a recall election this week, launched to protest his pandemic approach.
He said yes to science. He said yes to vaccines. He said yes to ending this pandemic.
The governor kept his job by a wide margin, but only after top Democrats, including Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, visited California to boost his campaign. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
Brian Taylor, an immigrant from Sierra Leone who is known in New York City as the Harlem Groomer, lost 80% of his non-essential business amid the COVID-19 pandemic. But he has found a unique way to keep doing his job and inspire a national movement. Elena Wolf has this story, narrated by Anna Rice.
For many people, cutting their own hair was difficult enough during the COVID-19 pandemic. It was worse for dog owners.
During the pandemic, I basically groomed her. I tried my best, bought some machines off of Amazon, but it wasn't the same as going to a groomer.
We just took the scissors and just cut the hair lower. We didn't try to style it.
But no one was more popular among Harlem dog owners than the certified dog groomer, Brian Taylor. The man with the colorful apron continued to groom pets out of a special van. Then the owners can pick up their freshly groomed pets at his home.
That's Bean, that's Kayla, that's Ranger, that's Hamilton, that's Sky.
My name is Brian Taylor, but most people know me as the dog father of Harlem.
because I've groomed over 10,000 dogs in the last 10 years, and I've been able to take care of all the dogs in the community.
Taylor calls the dog owners dog parents and his own home a daycare.
This is supposed to be my kitchen when I was the dogs. They have cubbies. These are the cubbies that they have with their stuff.
Business dropped during the pandemic, but grateful clients and local residents showered him with donations and gift cards. Taylor says he's using these donations to groom the dogs of pet owners who cannot afford his services. He also drives his van around the city to groom the pets of those who have hit hard economic times. The mobile services GoFundMe page has raised enough funds to allow Taylor to start another grooming tour. The Sierra Leone native says he loves dogs, but wasn't allowed to have one in his earlier years.
It's part of our Muslim religion that dogs are inside. So when I came here, around 15, my younger brother and I, we rescued a dog. And when we rescued the dog, we kept the dog for 3 weeks in my mom's basement because my mom found out from the smell of the dog, so we had to find another home for the dog. And I think at that moment, and I kept it in the back of my mind that one day I was gonna own my own dog.
He says his mother wanted him to finish college and become a banker. Instead, Taylor says he went to school to become a dog groomer and opened a successful business.
Grooming business across America is super successful because there's over 100 million dogs and cats, and there's over 300 million people. There's not enough dog groomers overall, and I feel like hopefully we can continue to showcase African Americans in the industry.
Taylor says he's glad he managed to keep his business running during the pandemic, but adds he's happy to see that business is returning to normal. For Eliana Wolf in New York, Anna Rice, VOA News.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell introduces us to the world's leading Ngoni player. Stay with us. As Germany prepares to elect a new leader later this month, climate change is high on the agenda. Severe flooding killed hundreds of people in July, which scientists blamed on global warming. But as Henry Ridgway reports, the country is also Europe's biggest emitter of carbon dioxide and is struggling to wean itself off fossil fuels.
It's difficult to believe that the gentle Ahr River that winds through the vineyards of Western Germany could grow into such a destructive force. 134 people were killed as floodwaters tore down the narrow gorge 8 weeks ago, sweeping everything in its path. As the water poured off the steep hillsides, the level of the river rose by over 9 metres in the space of just a few hours. Many of the residents didn't have a chance to escape. Scientists have blamed the intensity of the rainfall on climate change. For the survivors, it has been a grueling 2 months. The daily effort to rebuild lives amid the choking dust. The grief, the shock, the realization that life in these communities will never be the same again.
This town has been left in pieces, and there are lots of houses that won't be rebuilt. The fundamental problem is that with climate change, with this heavy rain that has impacted Germany, we have to take a different approach.
Will the climate crisis persuade German voters to take a new approach? Germany's Green Party is currently third in the polls, which shows support has actually fallen in recent weeks. The party blames a generational divide.
We had summers of drought, we had extreme rain, we had a lot of problems in our forests. So we feel that climate change is actually real and is happening. However, we see a clear divide between younger and older people. Younger people under the age of 40 tend to prioritize environmental issues, climate issues in their voting decisions. Older people don't.
There is a geographical divide too. In Saxony, in eastern Germany, lie some of Europe's largest lignite mines, commonly known as brown coal. It's among the most polluting and least efficient sources of energy. Germany plans to close all its brown coal mines like this one by 2038, and some want them shut down much sooner. But there are two big questions. What would replace the tens of thousands of jobs that would be lost in an economically depressed area of Germany? And what would replace the brown coal that provides 20% of Germany's electricity? With Germany phasing out nuclear power by the end of 2022, local officials say their lignite remains vital to Germany's prosperity.
Brown coal is still the #1 energy source in our state. Wind and solar are great, but when the sun doesn't shine or we have a day without wind, the basic energy supply for the industrial sector still has to be there. There is this East German saying, "I am a miner. Who can do more than me?" This basically says that as a miner, you are the foundation of the economy.
Back in the Ahr Valley, many residents say they are too busy rebuilding to bother about politics. But there is also frustration.
Of course, climate change was definitely part of the cause, but it was not the cause alone. They all kind of failed here, Merkel and her people. They failed. But I also believe the state politicians, they failed too.
Merkel's successor faces daunting challenges, tackling the climate crisis while powering Europe's largest economy, reconciling the climate-conscious youth with older generations, and continuing to balance Germany's lingering economic divide between East and West. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News in Leipzig, Germany.
VOA has hosted live music performances by artists from around the world for decades. Today, let's go back in time to enjoy one such vintage performance, a song by the world's leading Goni player from Mali and his family band. Here's Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell to tell us more.
In 2012, Malian griot musician Basekou Kouyaté and his family band Ngoni Ba performed a set of songs off of their third album called Janako. Here's Ne me fatigue pas, meaning don't tire me.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us